I never thought I'd be writing this post, but here I am at 2 a.m., crying into a glass of wine while scrolling through my ex-husband's Instagram engagement photos. Yes, I know I shouldn't be stalking his social media, but I can't help myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this is a mess I created entirely by myself. The marriage that wasn't enough. David and I met in graduate school. He was studying engineering, I was getting my MBA. We were both ambitious, driven people with big dreams. We dated for 3 years before getting married in what everyone said was the most beautiful wedding they'd ever attended. David insisted on paying for most of it himself because he didn't want to burden my parents, even though his salary as a junior engineer wasn't huge at the time. The first few years of marriage were good. Not perfect, but good. David was incredibly supportive of my career ambitions. When I got offered a promotion that required traveling 60% of the time, he encouraged me to take it even though it meant he'd be home alone most weeks. When I wanted to switch companies for better opportunities, he helped me practice interviews and celebrated every success. But somewhere around year 5, I started feeling restless. David had settled into a comfortable routine. He'd come home from his engineering job, we'd have dinner, watch Netflix, and go to bed. Weekends were spent doing household chores, visiting his parents, or hanging out with the same group of friends we'd known for years. He seemed perfectly content with his life, but I felt like I was suffocating. Don't get me wrong, David wasn't neglectful or abusive. He was actually an incredibly thoughtful husband. He remembered every anniversary, surprised me with my favorite flowers just because, and never once complained when my work trips got extended or I had to work late. He took care of all the boring adulting stuff, our taxes, home maintenance, car repairs, without ever making me feel guilty about not contributing equally to those tasks. But I wanted more excitement, more passion, more something. Around year 6 of my marriage, my company hired a new VP of sales named Marcus. He was everything David wasn't, charismatic, spontaneous, always talking about his latest adventure or the exotic places he'd traveled for work. Where David was steady and reliable, Marcus was unpredictable and thrilling. Marcus would casually mention flying to Tokyo for a weekend just because he found cheap flights. He'd show up to work with stories about trying some underground restaurant or attending an exclusive art gallery opening. He made my life with David feel incredibly ordinary by comparison. I want to be clear, I never physically cheated on David. But emotionally, I was completely infatuated with Marcus and the lifestyle he represented. Marcus and I started having long conversations during work trips. He'd tell me about all the places he wanted to travel, the experiences he wanted to have. He made me feel like I was wasting my 20s and early 30s being tied down to someone who was content with mediocrity. "You're too vibrant to be stuck in suburban married life," he told me once during a particularly late dinner in Chicago. "You could be doing anything, going anywhere. Don't you want more than this?" I did want more. Or at least I thought I did. I started pulling away from David without really realizing it. I'd come home from trips energized by conversations with Marcus and feel frustrated that David was excited to tell me about his weekend of organizing the garage or trying a new recipe. His contentment started to feel like complacency, and his stability started to feel like stagnation. I began picking fights about stupid things. Why didn't we ever go anywhere interesting? Why were we always hanging out with the same boring people? Why was he so satisfied with such an ordinary life? David, bless him, tried to address my concerns. He planned surprise weekend trips to nearby cities. He suggested we join a hiking club to meet new people. He even looked into taking salsa dancing lessons together because I'd mentioned feeling like we never did anything fun. But it wasn't enough. Nothing felt as exciting as the possibility of the life I could have if I wasn't tied down. The worst part is that David knew something was wrong, but he thought it was his fault. He started asking me constantly if I was happy, if there was anything he could do differently. He suggested marriage counseling multiple times, but I always shut it down because I was convinced the problem wasn't our communication. It was that we were fundamentally incompatible. The breaking point came during our 7th anniversary dinner. David had made reservations at the same restaurant where we had our first date, which I thought was unimaginative and predictable. He gave me a beautiful necklace and talked about how grateful he was for our life together, how he looked forward to growing old with me. I sat there listening to him and felt absolutely nothing except a desperate urge to escape. That night, I told him I wanted a divorce. David was devastated. He kept asking what he'd done wrong, if there was someone else, if we could work it out. I told him there wasn't anyone else, technically true, but that I just didn't love him the way I used to. I said we'd grown apart and wanted different things. The look on his face when I said I didn't love him anymore still haunts me. It was like watching someone die inside in real time. The divorce. David tried everything to save our marriage. He begged me to try counseling. He suggested a trial separation. He even offered to move to a different city if I thought a fresh start would help. But I was already mentally checked out. I'd convinced myself that I was being brave by choosing to leave a comfortable but unfulfilling situation. I thought I was choosing growth over stagnation, adventure over mediocrity. The divorce process was brutal, but not because David made it difficult. He was incredibly fair about everything. He let me keep most of our furniture, didn't fight me on the financial arrangements, and even helped me move into my new apartment. His kindness during our separation somehow made me feel even more justified in leaving.
See?
We were better as friends than as spouses. The divorce was finalized just before our 8th anniversary. Here's where the story takes a turn, and not the one I expected. Within a month of our divorce being final, I asked Marcus out for drinks. We'd been flirting and building tension for over a year, and I was finally free to see where it could lead. It was a disaster. Without the forbidden nature of our connection, Marcus was just a guy. A pretty shallow guy, actually. Yes, he traveled constantly and had exciting stories, but he was also completely self-absorbed. Every conversation was about his experiences, his adventures, his opinions. When I tried to talk about my own life or interests, he'd nod politely and then redirect back to himself. Worse, I realized that his spontaneous lifestyle was only possible because he had no real commitments or responsibilities. He could fly to Tokyo for a weekend because he didn't have anyone who mattered enough to stay home for. His exciting life was actually kind of lonely and empty. We went on maybe 5 dates before I realized that I'd blown up my marriage for a fantasy. But surely my newfound freedom would be worth it, right? I could travel, meet new people, have adventures, live the exciting life I'd always wanted. Meanwhile, David was doing surprisingly well. At first, he looked terrible. He lost weight, seemed exhausted, was clearly struggling. But after about 6 months, he started to bounce back. He joined that hiking club he'd suggested we try together. He started taking photography classes. He got a promotion at work that came with a significant salary increase. Through mutual friends, I heard he was doing things like taking weekend camping trips and learning to rock climb. The man I'd left for being too boring and predictable was out there living a full, interesting life. Without me. About a year after our divorce, I heard through the grapevine that he was dating someone. Her name was Sarah, and she was a teacher he'd met through the hiking club. I told myself I was happy for him, that this proved we'd made the right decision in divorcing. But I wasn't happy. I was jealous. While David was thriving, I was struggling. Dating in your 30s after 8 years of marriage is brutal. Most of the good ones are taken, and the ones who are available often have significant baggage or commitment issues. I went on countless first dates that led nowhere. I had a few relationships that lasted a few months each, but nothing substantial. The men I met either wanted casual hookups, which left me feeling empty, or came on way too strong, which scared me after my experience with Marcus. I threw myself into work, got another promotion, started traveling even more. On paper, my life looked successful and exciting. I was making more money than ever, staying in nice hotels, eating at expensive restaurants in different cities every week. But I was lonely, deeply, profoundly lonely in a way I'd never experienced during my marriage. I started thinking about David more and more. I remembered how he used to text me good morning every single day, even when I was traveling. How he'd research restaurants in whatever city I was visiting and send me recommendations. How he'd always pick me up from the airport, no matter how late my flight arrived. I remembered how safe I felt with him, how he made me laugh, how he supported my dreams even when they meant sacrifice for him. I remembered how he'd rub my feet after long days, how he'd make my favorite soup when I was sick, how he'd listen patiently to me vent about work drama without trying to fix everything. I started to realize that what I'd interpreted as boring stability was actually something much more valuable. It was home. The engagement news. Last month, I found out through Facebook that David was engaged to Sarah. The photos showed him looking happier than I'd seen him in years, maybe happier than I'd ever seen him. Sarah was pretty in a natural, wholesome way, the kind of woman who looked like she'd be genuinely fun to be around. In the engagement photos, David was looking at her the same way he used to look at me in our early years. But there was something different about his smile. It seemed more confident, more settled. Like he'd learned something about himself and what he wanted. I spent hours looking through their photos together. Pictures of them hiking, of course, traveling to places David and I had never been, attending what looked like friends' weddings and birthday parties. They looked like they had a rich, full life together. In one photo, they were making dinner together in what I recognized as David's kitchen, our old kitchen. Sarah was laughing at something David had said, and he was looking at her with such pure adoration that it made my chest ache. That's when it hit me. I had been the love of David's life, and I threw it away. But he wasn't going to spend forever mourning what we'd lost. He'd found someone new to love, someone who appreciated all the wonderful qualities I'd taken for granted. I've spent the last few weeks doing a lot of soul-searching, and I've come to some painful realizations. I confused stability with stagnation. David wasn't boring, he was dependable. He wasn't settling for mediocrity. He was building a solid foundation for a life together. The routine I found suffocating was actually the rhythm of a healthy, committed relationship. I romanticized uncertainty and chaos. I thought excitement and passion required constant novelty and drama. But real love, the kind that lasts, is found in the quiet moments, the daily choices to show up for each other, the comfort of knowing someone completely and being completely known. I was seeking external validation for internal emptiness. My dissatisfaction with my marriage wasn't really about David or our life together. It was about my own insecurities and fear of missing out. I thought a different relationship would fix whatever was broken inside me, but that's not how it works. I took his love for granted. David loved me unconditionally, supported my dreams even when they conflicted with his preferences, and tried to make our marriage work even when I was pulling away. I'll never find another love like that, and I threw it away because it felt too easy. The grass is greener is a lie. The grass is greener where you water it. I spent so much time fantasizing about other possibilities that I stopped nurturing what I already had. David is now watering a different lawn, and it's flourishing. Where I am now, I'm successful, financially independent, and technically living the exciting life I thought I wanted. I have a beautiful apartment in the city, a closet full of designer clothes, and enough airline miles to travel anywhere in the world. But I'm alone. And not just alone, I'm lonely for something specific. I'm lonely for David. I miss his terrible dad jokes that used to make me roll my eyes. I miss how he'd get excited about new cooking techniques and make me try his experimental dishes. I miss how he'd research solutions to my problems without me asking just because he hated seeing me stressed. I miss how he'd hold my hand during scary movies, even though he was probably more scared than I was. I miss being part of a team. I miss having someone who was always in my corner, who celebrated my successes and comforted me during failures. I miss having a person who is building a future with me instead of just enjoying the present moment. Most of all, I miss being truly known by someone and knowing them in return. David knew that I liked my coffee ridiculously strong, that I got cranky when I was hungry, that I needed exactly 23 minutes to get ready in the morning. He knew my dreams, my fears, my family history, my weird habits. And I knew all of his. That kind of intimacy doesn't just happen. It's built over years of choosing each other every single day. And I gave it up for nothing. So here's what I'm struggling with. Is it too late? I know David is engaged, and I know I have no right to interfere in his happiness. He's clearly moved on and built a beautiful life with someone who appreciates him the way I should have. But I can't help wondering, What if I told him how I feel? What if I explained that I made a mistake, that I understand now what we had and what I lost? Is there any chance he'd be willing to give us another try? I know this makes me sound selfish and delusional. I know that showing up and declaring my feelings would be incredibly unfair to both David and Sarah. I know that he's probably better off without me, that he deserves someone who recognized his worth from the beginning. But I also know that we had something real, something worth fighting for, and I was too stupid and immature to see it at the time. Reddit, I need you to talk some sense into me. Should I A. Tell David how I feel and ask if there's any chance of reconciliation, even though he's engaged to someone else? B. Write him a letter explaining my realizations and apologizing, without asking for anything in return? C. Accept that I made my choice and leave them alone to be happy? D. Something else entirely? I know I sound pathetic. I know I made this bed, and now I have to lie in it. But I can't shake the feeling that David was my person, and I let him slip away, because I was too busy looking for something better instead of appreciating something good. Has anyone else been in this situation? Did you ever get a second chance with someone you let go? Or am I just torturing myself by holding on to hope that will only lead to more heartbreak? Please be honest, even if it's not what I want to hear. I clearly have terrible judgment when it comes to my own life. Update 1. Posted 3 hours later. Holy shit, this blew up while I was trying to sleep, unsuccessfully. I'm reading through all your comments, and wow, you're not holding back, and honestly, I needed to hear it. A lot of you are asking valid questions that I should address. Did you ever actually love David, or just the security he provided? This one hit me hard. I think I did love him, but maybe not in the mature way he deserved. I loved how he made me feel about myself, how safe and supported I felt with him. But did I love him, his quirks, his dreams, his whole person? I'm not sure I ever took the time to really see him as a complete individual rather than as my husband who fulfilled certain roles in my life. Why didn't you fight harder when you were feeling disconnected? Because I'm apparently an idiot who thought the grass was greener instead of trying to water my own lawn. I convinced myself that if a relationship required work, it meant we weren't right for each other. I believed in the Hollywood bullshit that true love should always feel effortless and exciting. What makes you think you've changed enough to deserve a second chance? Honestly, maybe I haven't. Maybe I'm still the same selfish person who would get restless again in a few years. The therapy I've been doing since the divorce has helped me understand my patterns, but understanding and changing are two different things. Have you considered that David might actually be happier without you? Yes, and it destroys me. From what I can see, and I know social media isn't the whole story, he just seemed genuinely happy with Sarah in a way he might never have been with me. Maybe I was holding him back from becoming the person he was meant to be. A lot of you are telling me to leave him alone, and you're probably right. But some of you are sharing stories about second chances and people who found their way back to each other, and that's giving me hope that might be dangerous. Keep the tough love coming. I clearly need it. Update 2. Posted 1 day later. I did something stupid last night. Actually, let me be more specific. I did several stupid things in sequence. After reading all your comments, the harsh ones and the hopeful ones, I decided I needed to know more about David's relationship with Sarah before I could make any decisions. So, I may have done some extensive social media stalking. Here's what I found. Sarah's Instagram goes back about 2 years, right around when she and David started dating. Her photos show a woman who genuinely seems to love the outdoors, lots of hiking pics that aren't just pose shots, who has close relationships with friends and family, and who looks genuinely happy in every photo with David. But here's the part that made me feel sick. In her captions, she talks about David the way I wish I had when we were married. She calls him her adventure buddy, talks about how he's teaching her photography, mentions how he surprised her with a camping trip for her birthday because he listened when she said she'd never seen the Milky Way. She sees all the wonderful things about him that I took for granted. Worse, she appreciates the quiet, steady parts of his personality that I found boring. In one post, she wrote about how grateful she was to be with someone who makes ordinary Tuesday nights feel special. Reading that felt like getting punched in the stomach. But then I found something that made me do the stupidest thing possible. I found David's best friend Mike's Instagram, and he had posted a photo from David's bachelor party last weekend. Bachelor party. David is getting married soon, not just engaged. In my wine-fueled emotional state, I decided this was urgent. I couldn't let him get married without knowing how I felt. So, I texted him at 1 a.m. on a Tuesday. The text said, "Hi David. I know this is out of nowhere and probably inappropriate, but I saw Mike's post about your bachelor party and realized you're getting married soon. I've been doing a lot of thinking since our divorce, and I need you to know that I made a terrible mistake. I understand now what we had and what I threw away. I'm not asking you to leave Sarah, but I needed you to know that you were the love of my life, and I was too stupid to see it. I hope you're happy, and I'm sorry for everything." I sent it before I could chicken out. He read it immediately. Apparently, he's still a night owl. And then, he called me. I was not prepared for David to actually respond, let alone call. My hands were shaking when I answered. "Emma," he said, and just hearing his voice saying my name made me start crying. "I'm so sorry," I said immediately. "I shouldn't have texted you. I know you're with Sarah, and I know." "Stop," he said gently. "Just stop talking for a second." So I did. "I need you to know that getting your text wasn't a complete shock," he said. "Sarah and I ran into your friend Jen at the farmer's market a few months ago, and she mentioned that you've been asking about me. And honestly, I've been wondering if you might reach out when you heard about the engagement." This surprised me. "You have?" "Emma, we were together for 11 years total, married for 8. I know you. I know how your mind works. I figured there was a chance you might have some feelings about me moving on." We were quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you miss me, or do you miss being married?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you contacting me because you realized you actually love me and want to be with me specifically? Or are you lonely and nostalgic and missing the security and companionship of marriage in general?" I thought about it for a long time before answering because I realized it was the most important question anyone had ever asked me. "Both," I said finally. "I think it started as missing being married, missing having a partner. But the more I've thought about it over the past 2 years, the more I realize that what I miss isn't just having a husband, it's having you as a husband. I miss your terrible cooking experiments and how excited you'd get when one actually turned out well. I miss how you'd research stuff I mentioned caring about and bring it up in conversations later. I miss how you made me feel like I was the most interesting person in the world, even when I was being boring." He was quiet for a long time. "David, I'm here," he said. "I'm just processing. I know I have no right to say any of this," I continued. "I know you're happy with Sarah and you're getting married, and I'm probably just messing with your head by bringing this up now. But I couldn't live with myself if you got married without knowing that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life." Another long pause. "Emma," he said finally, "I need you to understand something. When you left, it nearly destroyed me. Not just because I lost my wife, but because I started questioning everything about myself. I thought I was boring, unambitious, not good enough for you. I spent months wondering what was wrong with me that you fell out of love." My heart was breaking listening to him. "It took me a long time to realize that there wasn't anything wrong with me," he continued. "We just wanted different things, and that's okay. But going through that, it changed me. I learned things about myself, about what I need in a partner, about what kind of life I want to build." "And what kind of life is that?" I asked. "The kind where I'm with someone who chooses me every day, not just because I'm convenient or comfortable, but because they genuinely want to be with me. Someone who appreciates the person I am right now, not who I could become with enough changes." The implication was clear. Sarah was that person for him. I had not been. "I understand," I said. "And I'm happy that you found that with Sarah. She seems wonderful." "She is," he said simply. "Emma, I did love you. I probably always will in some way. But I'm not the same person I was when we were married, and honestly, neither are you. We're both different people now who have learned things about ourselves and what we want." "So that's it?" I asked. "There's no part of you that wonders what it would be like if we tried again?" He sighed. If you had called me a year ago, maybe even 6 months ago.
I don't know what I would have said.
But Emma, I'm marrying Sarah in 3 weeks. I love her. I've built a life with her, and she trusts me. I can't and won't betray that trust by entertaining what-ifs with my ex-wife. He was right, and I knew it. I'm sorry, I said. I shouldn't have put you in this position. No, you shouldn't have, he agreed. But I'm glad you did, in a way. Because now we can both have closure. Closure. I need you to stop checking up on me through mutual friends, he said. I need you to stop looking at my social media. Stop asking Jen about my life. Stop torturing yourself by keeping tabs on me. It's not healthy for either of us. He was right about that too. And, Emma, I need you to really think about why you're reaching out now. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you only want me back because you can't have me. That's not love, that's ego. That hit me like a slap in the face, mostly because I was afraid he might be right. After the call, we talked for about an hour total. He asked about my work, I asked about his photography hobby. We talked about his parents, who I'd always loved, and he asked about mine. It was strange. We fell back into easy conversation like no time had passed, but there was also this underlying sadness to the whole thing. Before we hung up, he said, Emma, I really do hope you find happiness. But you're not going to find it by looking backward. And you're not going to find it in another person. You have to find it in yourself first. I know, I said, even though I'm not sure I really do know that yet. Take care of yourself, he said. You too. And David, congratulations on the engagement. I mean that.
Thank you, he said.
Goodbye, Emma.
Goodbye.
It's been 24 hours since that phone call, and I've been a mess. Not because I think I lost my chance with David, I think I knew deep down that ship had sailed. But because I'm finally, truly facing the reality of what I did and who I am. David was right about the timing being suspicious. Maybe I do only want him, because I can't have him. Maybe this is my ego refusing to accept that someone moved on from me. But I also think there's truth in what I told him, that I genuinely miss him, not just being married. The question is whether that realization comes from growth or from loss aversion. I've made an appointment with a therapist for Thursday. Not to figure out how to win David back, but to figure out how to fix whatever is broken in me that made me throw away a good thing in the first place. I'm also going to respect his request to stop keeping tabs on him. I've unfollowed him on social media and asked Jen to please not update me on his life anymore. To everyone who commented, thank you for your honesty, especially when it was brutal. You were right that contacting him was selfish and unfair. You were right that I needed to examine my motives more carefully. But I'm also grateful that some of you shared stories about your own mistakes and regrets, because it helped me feel less alone in this. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I'll ever stop regretting the choices I made. But I'm going to try to focus on becoming a better person instead of dwelling on the past. David deserves happiness, and so does Sarah. And maybe, if I do the work on myself, I'll deserve it too someday. Final update, posted 2 weeks later. I wasn't planning to update again, but something happened that I think provides closure to this story. I've been seeing the therapist twice a week since my last update. It's been intense. We've been digging into my patterns around relationships, commitment, and what she calls chronic dissatisfaction disorder. Apparently, that's a real thing. One of the exercises she had me do was write a letter to David that I would never send, just to process my feelings without the pressure of crafting something that would affect another person's life. The letter ended up being 12 pages long and helped me realize some things about myself that I didn't like but needed to face. But that's not why I'm updating. Yesterday, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "Hi Emma, this is Sarah. I know this might seem strange, but I was wondering if we could meet for coffee sometime. David told me about your conversation, and I have some things I'd like to say. No pressure, if you'd rather not." My first instinct was to say no. What could David's fiancée possibly want to say to me? Was she going to tell me to stay away from her man? Ask me not to attend their wedding, which I obviously wasn't planning to do anyway? But my therapist had been encouraging me to lean into discomfort as a way of growing, so I said yes. We met at a coffee shop downtown yesterday afternoon. I was expecting to meet someone who either hated me or pitied me, but Sarah was surprisingly warm. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," she said as we sat down. "I know this is weird." "It's definitely weird," I agreed. "Can I ask what this is about?" She took a breath. "David told me about your phone call. He was really torn up about it, actually, not because he's having second thoughts, but because he hates that you're hurting." "He's a good person," I said. "Always has been." "He is," she agreed. "And that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." She went on to tell me that David had shared some details about our marriage and divorce, not to gossip or complain about me, but because he wanted Sarah to understand his history so she could love him better. "He told me that you said he was boring," Sarah said. "That you felt like he wasn't ambitious enough, that you wanted more excitement." I felt my face burn with shame. I was an idiot. "Maybe," she said. "But I also think you weren't wrong about being incompatible." That surprised me. "What do you mean?" "Emma, David told me about how hard he tried to save your marriage. How he suggested counseling, planned surprise trips, tried to become more spontaneous and adventurous. Do you know what that tells me?" I shook my head. "It tells me that he was willing to fundamentally change who he was in order to keep you. That's not healthy, and it's not sustainable." She continued. "With me, David has never once felt like he needed to be different than he is. I fell in love with his steadiness, his thoughtfulness, his contentment with simple pleasures. The things you saw as limitations, I see as his greatest strengths." "So, you're saying we really were incompatible?" I asked. "I think you needed different things," she said. "And there's nothing wrong with that. But Emma, David told me something else that I think you need to hear." "What?" "He said that during your marriage, especially toward the end, he felt like you were always looking for an exit. Like you were constantly evaluating whether the relationship was worth staying in, rather than being committed to making it work." That hit me hard because it was true. He said it made him feel like he was always auditioning to be your husband instead of actually being your husband. That's exhausting for anyone. We sat in silence for a moment while I processed that. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I don't want you to spend the rest of your life thinking you lost the one. I want you to understand that you and David weren't right for each other, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're a terrible person or that you'll never find love again." "But I hurt him so badly," I said. "You did," she agreed. "But you also set him free to find someone who loves him exactly as he is. And you set yourself free to figure out what you actually want, instead of trying to force something that wasn't working." Sarah talked for another hour about her relationship with David. She told me about how they met, how their love developed, what their daily life together looks like. And listening to her, I realized something important. She and David have the relationship I thought I wanted, but could never have created with him. They travel together constantly, camping, hiking, photography trips. But it's not because she pushed him to be more adventurous. It's because they genuinely share those interests. She loves the outdoors as much as he does. She's fascinated by his photography and is learning the hobby herself. They have friends from their hiking club, their photography group, the school where she teaches. But David didn't have to join these activities to please her. He wanted to do them, and finding someone who shared his interests just made them more fun. She appreciates his steady, calm personality because she's naturally more anxious and finds his presence soothing. What I saw as him being unambitious, she sees as him being secure and content. What I experienced as boring routine, she experiences as comforting stability. "The thing is," Sarah said, "David told me about some of the things you wanted to do together. Travel to exotic places, go to art gallery openings, live a more urban lifestyle. Those aren't bad things to want. They're just not things that make David happy." "So, I wasn't wrong to want them?" I asked. "Not at all," Sarah said. "You were wrong to expect David to want them too, and you were wrong to see his different preferences as character flaws. But wanting excitement and novelty and urban adventures? That's just who you are." The clarity I'd been missing. Sitting there with Sarah, I finally understood what had gone wrong in my marriage. It wasn't that David was inadequate or that I was terrible. We were just fundamentally different people who tried to force compatibility instead of accepting incompatibility. I had spent years trying to make David more like what I wanted, and apparently he had spent years trying to make himself more like what he thought I wanted. Neither of us had been honest about who we really were or what we actually needed. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Sarah. "Of course." "Do you ever get bored? Does the routine ever feel suffocating?" She smiled. "Never. But Emma, I think that's because David and I have the same definition of what makes life meaningful. We both find joy in small things, a perfect sunset during a hike, trying to photograph a difficult bird, cooking a meal together from vegetables we grew in our garden. You find joy in different things, and that's okay. I think I've been trying to convince myself that there was something wrong with wanting those different things," I admitted. "There isn't," she said firmly. "But there is something wrong with trying to change someone else to match your needs, or trying to change yourself to match theirs." Before we left, as we were getting ready to leave, Sarah said something that I keep thinking about. "Emma, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but David and I are genuinely grateful for your divorce." I must have looked shocked, because she quickly continued. "Not because we're glad you got hurt, but because it led both of you to where you needed to be. David learned to value himself and not settle for someone who saw him as inadequate. You learned, well, hopefully you're learning what you actually need in a partner and in life." "And what do you think I need?" I asked. "I think you need someone who shares your sense of adventure, who gets excited about the same things you do, who doesn't make you feel guilty for wanting more than a quiet domestic life. And I think you need to stop seeing those desires as shallow or wrong." She paused. "But I also think you need to figure out the difference between wanting adventure and running away from commitment, because those are two very different things." The real closure. Before we said goodbye, Sarah handed me an envelope. "What is this?" I asked. "It's from David. He wrote it after your phone call but wasn't sure if he should give it to you. I told him I'd handle it." I opened it later that night. The letter was 2 pages long, but the part that mattered most was this. "Emma, I need you to know that our marriage ending wasn't a failure. It was a course correction. We were both trying to be people we weren't, for people who needed something different than what we could authentically provide. I spent a long time angry at you for leaving, and then I spent time angry at myself for not being enough. But I'm not angry anymore. I understand now that you couldn't love the person I actually am, and I couldn't be the person you needed me to be. That's not anyone's fault. I hope you find someone who loves your restlessness, who shares your curiosity about the world, who makes you feel excited about the future instead of trapped by routine. You deserve that kind of love. And I hope you understand that leaving me was actually the kindest thing you could have done. It freed both of us to find relationships where we could be completely ourselves. I wish you happiness, Emma. Real happiness, not just the absence of dissatisfaction. Take care of yourself. David." Where I am today. It's been a week since I met with Sarah and read David's letter. I've been thinking a lot about what they both said about compatibility versus trying to force relationships to work. I realize now that I spent years feeling guilty for wanting things David didn't want and trying to convince myself I should be satisfied with the life he offered. But I also spent years trying to change him into someone he wasn't, instead of accepting that we simply weren't right for each other. My therapist says this is a breakthrough. She says that most people in incompatible relationships either blame themselves entirely, like David was doing, or blame their partner entirely, like I was doing. Understanding that we were both good people who simply needed different things is apparently the first step toward finding a relationship that actually works. I'm not dating anyone right now. I'm focusing on figuring out who I am when I'm not trying to be someone else's version of an ideal partner. I'm also working on distinguishing between healthy desire for novelty and excitement versus running away from commitment and intimacy. But for the first time since my divorce, I'm not spending every day regretting my decision. I'm starting to understand that staying in a marriage where both people were constantly trying to be different than they were would have been worse than ending it. If you're in a relationship where you constantly feel like you're not enough, or like your partner isn't enough, that's important information. It doesn't necessarily mean either of you is a bad person. It might mean you're not right for each other. If you find yourself always trying to change your partner, or feeling like you have to fundamentally change yourself to make them happy, that's also important information. Love isn't supposed to be a constant uphill battle. Relationships take work, yes, but they shouldn't require you to become a different person. I don't know if I'll ever find the kind of love David and Sarah have, but I'm finally understanding that I won't find it by trying to recreate what David and I had, or by settling for someone who doesn't genuinely appreciate who I am. The wedding. David and Sarah got married last weekend. I know because several of our mutual friends posted photos on social media, which I'm allowing myself to look at because my therapist says avoiding all reminders isn't healthy either. They looked radiant, genuinely, authentically happy in a way that I don't think David and I ever achieved, even in our best moments. And you know what? I'm happy for them. Not in a fake, performative way, but genuinely happy that two people found the right person for them. I'm also sad, not because I still want David back, but because I'm mourning the time I wasted trying to force something that was never going to work. I'm sad for the years David spent thinking he wasn't good enough, and for the years I spent feeling trapped by my own choices. But I'm also hopeful, in a way I haven't been in a long time. Because if David could find someone who loves him exactly as he is, maybe I can find someone who loves me exactly as I am too. Final thoughts. 3 months ago, I thought I had made the biggest mistake of my life by divorcing David. Now I understand that the mistake wasn't divorcing him, it was marrying him in the first place, when we were both too young and too naive to understand what we actually needed in a partner. The mistake was spending years trying to change each other instead of accepting that we wanted different things. The mistake was seeing incompatibility as a problem to solve instead of information to act on. I'm not proud of how I handled the end of our marriage. I should have been more honest about my feelings instead of pulling away and picking fights. I should have been kinder during the divorce process. I should have respected his boundaries instead of reaching out when he was engaged to someone else. But I'm learning to forgive myself for being human, for making mistakes, for not knowing things I had no way of knowing at the time. And I'm learning that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone go, not because you don't love them, but because you love them enough to want them to find happiness, even if it's not with you. David found his happiness. Someday I'll find mine too. But first, I need to figure out who I am when I'm not trying to be someone else.